I pushed the door open, expecting laughter and turkey in the oven. Instead, silence. Cold. The kind of silence that hums in your bones. The air smelled like dust and old wood, not family. Then I saw it. A single note on the counter, folded neat as a blade. Gone on a cruise with Ryan. You'll stay home and look after Dad. Lauren. My hand froze midair. The TV sat dark. The clock ticked too loud. From the living room, a creak. The rocking chair moving on its own. Arthur sat there, eyes like blue glass cutting through the dim light. He didn't look surprised, just tired. "Shall we begin?" he rasped. That was the moment I knew. My wife didn't just leave, she erased me. If you've ever been left behind when you least expected it, hit subscribe. This story isn't over. The house felt colder than the number on the thermostat. 62 degrees. The kind of chill that crawls under your skin and stays. Lauren's husband, left behind. I rubbed my hands together, staring at the empty fridge. Expired yogurt, half a takeout box, a bottle of mustard. That was it. Arthur's cane tapped the hardwood. Slow, steady, like a metronome for loneliness. I read her note again, tracing the neat, businesslike handwriting. No emotion, no apology. Gone on a cruise with Ryan. You'll stay home and look after Dad. She didn't even sign love. I texted her one word, call, then waited. Only silence answered. That's when it hit me. No wife, no family, no warmth. Just me, an old man, in four walls that felt like a coffin. I found a can of soup, tomato, dust on the lid. Arthur watched me twist it open. "Don't," he said, his voice gravel and regret. "We deserve better than soup." That line hung in the air. We deserve better. Maybe he was right. Maybe I did too. So I grabbed my coat, stepped out into the brittle air. The old Ford sat under a blanket of maple leaves, cold engine groaning awake. The town was ghost quiet, every house glowing with laughter and turkey smells, except ours. I bought a small turkey breast, potatoes, green beans. The cashier smiled. "Big dinner tonight?" I forced a grin. Something like that. Driving home, I kept hearing Lauren's words about family traditions. Guess that was just another one she broke. That night, I wasn't cooking dinner. I was fighting for dignity. When I came back, the house smelled like dust and something fading. Arthur sat at the table with a folder thick as a confession. "Look at this," he said. His hands trembled, but his eyes didn't. Inside, pharmacy receipts, canceled doctor visits, bank withdrawals. He tapped a line with his finger. Pancreatic enzymes, half dose. My throat went dry. "They did this to you?" Arthur nodded slowly. "Been that way for months." The papers looked small in his shaking hands, but they screamed louder than words. It wasn't just neglect, it was calculation. They hadn't left us for a vacation. They'd escaped their own guilt. I closed the folder gently. And in that quiet moment, I realized this wasn't just my betrayal. It was his too. Something in me needed proof. I opened our joint bank app. The numbers glowed up at me, and my stomach dropped. A $5,000 withdrawal, labeled reinvestment adjustment, dated 3 days ago. Recipient, Caribbean Voyages Limited. My hand shook. That was my 401k, my future, my trust. Lauren hadn't just left me. She funded her escape with my life savings. The room tilted. Arthur's old clock ticked like a hammer in my head. Each second another lie, another dollar gone. He looked at me. Didn't need to ask. He knew that look. The kind that comes when you realize love was just a transaction. I set the phone down and said nothing, because sometimes silence is the only sound a man makes when he's been gutted. I cooked anyway. Small turkey breast, mashed potatoes, green beans from a can. Simple, but it smelled like something human again. Arthur lifted his fork with shaking hands. "Haven't smelled home in years," he said softly. We ate in near silence, except for the gentle clink of silverware and the slow crackle of the heater finally kicking in. The warmth didn't just come from the furnace. It came from doing something right, no matter how small. For the first time that day, I wasn't just a man left behind. I was a man standing back up. Arthur looked across the table. "You're a good man, Mark." I didn't answer, but for the first time in a long time, I believed maybe he was right. The phone buzzed, a soft, innocent sound that cut through the quiet like a blade. Instagram. Melissa, Lauren's sister. There it was. Lauren, Ryan, her mother. Sunlight so bright it almost mocked me. Champagne glasses high, captions smiling, hashtag new beginnings. I zoomed in, Lauren's hand resting on Ryan's chest, familiar, confident, like it had always belonged there. Arthur looked over my shoulder, silent. Then he sighed. "Guess they're not coming back, huh?" No anger in his voice, just knowledge, the kind that sinks deep and stays. I stared at that photo until the screen dimmed. New beginnings. For them, maybe. For me, it was the end of something I thought was permanent. Some endings don't explode. They just go quiet. Later that night, we sat at the table, 2 plates, 1 lamp, and the steady hum of the heater. Arthur started talking. "Used to run accounting for a bank," he said. "Numbers don't lie. People do." He told me about Marjorie, the spending, the designer purses, the way she turned his home into her empire. "I became a wallet with legs," he said, with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. I told him about losing my job at the plant. The layoffs, the silence from Lauren after. We both laughed, the kind of laugh that hides bruises. There was no pity between us, just recognition. 2 men stripped down to what's left when people stop pretending to love you. And somewhere between his coughs and my silence, a quiet alliance was born. I finally said it out loud. "This isn't neglect, Arthur. It's abuse." He nodded slowly. "And what your wife did, that's financial control." The words hung between us, sharp and clean. Naming things has power. It turns fog into something you can fight. We looked at each other. Same weariness, same resolve. He reached for a notepad. "Let's keep track. Everything. Dates, calls, money. No emotions, just facts." I grabbed a pen, wrote 1 word on the cover. Receipts. Because men like us don't shout. We build cases. Not to get revenge. To make truth impossible to ignore. That night, the house didn't feel empty anymore. It felt like a command center. Arthur called Patricia, his lawyer, sharp woman, steady voice. She didn't hesitate. "Document everything, visually, legally, emotionally. Truth looks better in daylight." By evening, we had equipment delivered. A hospital bed, an oxygen tank, monitors. Not fake, just proof of what was already real. Arthur's health, their neglect. I set up the room like a scene, dim light, clear shadows. Photos, videos, logs. Every angle told the story they'd tried to bury. He looked around and nodded. Now they can't say they didn't know. It wasn't theater. It was evidence. But what he didn't tell me was who he planned to show it to. Our quiet war had begun. I started calling Lauren. Voicemail. Again and again. "Arthur's not doing well. He's struggling to breathe." No response. I sent texts, each more desperate than the last. Then I began recording the calls, time-stamping each message. Evidence. Proof of her silence. Arthur watched me from his chair, eyes tired but sharp. "She won't answer," he said softly. "But now the world will know she didn't." The phone felt heavy in my hand. Each unanswered call was a nail in a coffin, not his, but theirs. When I played the recordings back, I didn't hear my voice. I heard a man who'd stopped hoping for answers and started preparing for war. The doorbell rang just as I finished logging the last call. An older woman stood there holding a casserole dish wrapped in foil. "I'm Edith Peterson, live across the street," she said. "Thought you two might need dinner." Her eyes softened when she saw Arthur in the chair. "Poor man. Last month he fell in the yard. My husband had to pick him up. Your wife was home, but she never came out. Just turned the TV up louder." I felt something twist inside me. "Would you be willing to write that down?" I asked. She didn't hesitate. "About time someone cared," she said, signing her name in careful cursive. When she left, I snapped a photo of the door timestamp. Witness. Statement. Proof. That casserole might have been warm, but what she'd handed me burned colder than anything I'd ever felt. Arthur's coughing fit came just after midnight, deep, ragged, like his lungs were tearing. I held his back, felt every shudder through my palms. When it passed, he whispered, "Read me something, will you?" I picked up The Big Sleep. Chandler, his favorite, read the first lines out loud, about the smell of rain, about endings dressed as beginnings. He chuckled softly. That one fits. I looked at him under the thin light, a proud man folded into a blanket that seemed too big for his shrinking body. In that moment, he wasn't a burden. He was family. I closed the book, my voice catching. "You okay?" He nodded. "For now." And for the first time, I stopped feeling like the caretaker she'd dumped here. I was something else, a witness to a man's last stand. The next morning, I turned the kitchen table into a command center. Laptop, scanner app, folders, every document Arthur had, I digitized it. Medical, banking, phone records, each tagged and time-stamped med, bank, call, witness. I built a timeline, before, during, and after their little Caribbean getaway. Dropped in the Instagram photos, the call logs, the receipts. Patterns appeared, clear as daylight. Neglect isn't just emotional. It leaves footprints. When I finished, I backed everything up 3 times. Drive, cloud, encrypted USB. It wasn't paranoia. It was survival. Arthur walked in quietly, watching me work. "You're thorough," he said. "Just learned from the best," I replied. Neither of us knew how soon we'd need every single file. The truth wasn't just a story anymore, it was structure, and once you build structure, lies start to collapse. Patricia showed up the next morning, sharp coat, colder eyes. "Let's get this done," she said. We helped Arthur into the car. Snow flurries whispered across the windshield. At the bank, the manager smiled warmly. "Mr. Grant, still sharp as ever." Arthur grinned. "Sharper than my family gives me credit for." He signed the transfer papers, moving everything into a trust under Patricia's guidance. Each signature sounded like a door closing for good. Then the manager said it. "Your daughter was here last week, asking about your accounts." Arthur paused, pen midair, then looked at me. "See what I mean?" he whispered. By the time we left, the air outside felt different. Cleaner, somehow. That's the thing about doing the right thing quietly. It doesn't make noise. It just settles in your bones. On the drive back, snowflakes drifted across the hood, melting before they touched. Arthur stared out the window. "You know, Mark, never argue in anger," he said. "Anger fades. Paper lasts." I nodded, half smiling. "Receipts over rage." He laughed, a dry, genuine sound that warmed the car more than the heater. We drove in silence after that, the kind of silence that feels earned. When we got home, I built a fire. The logs cracked and popped, small sounds of peace. Arthur leaned back, eyes half closed. "We're not fighting them," he said. "We're teaching them what truth looks like." I poured us each a cup of coffee. He raised his in a slow toast. "To quiet justice." And I thought, maybe this is what strength really is. Not shouting, just staying calm long enough to win. Morning light crept through the blinds, pale and unforgiving. Arthur's lips were blue. His breathing came short and wet. I called Diane, the hospice nurse. Calm, steady voice. "Hydration first, pain management, keep him comfortable." She talked me through each step while my hands shook only once. Arthur squeezed my wrist. "Don't panic, son." His skin was cold, but his eyes were sharp. I followed every instruction like it was scripture. Ice chips, measured meds, damp cloth on his neck. The camera gear still sat in the corner. The props, the staged proof. Now the performance was gone. This was real. The line between acting and life had vanished, thin as a razor, cutting both of us. That afternoon, he whispered something strange. Peaches. Fresh ones. It was November. Snow outside. I drove to 3 different stores before finding a few soft enough to pass. Sliced them clean, added cream the way he said Martha used to. When I handed him the bowl, his hands trembled. He took one bite and smiled. a small, boyish smile that hit me harder than any speech could. "No one's remembered that in years," he said. I couldn't answer. It wasn't about food, it was about dignity. The smallest proof that he still mattered. That's the thing they never understand, the ones who walk away. What keeps a man alive isn't wealth or revenge, it's being seen. Patricia came back with the notary. Briefcase, tripod, quiet respect. We set up the camera, light hitting Arthur's face just right, clear, honest. When the red light blinked, he began. "My name is Arthur Grant. This is my final statement." His voice didn't shake once. He named the reasons: abandonment, neglect, financial theft. Then he said my name, slow, deliberate, carved into record. "I leave everything to Mark Dawson, who treated me with dignity when my own blood did not." Even Patricia looked down, eyes glassy. When the camera clicked off, the silence felt holy. Law, morality, humanity, all in one man's final proof. He didn't just sign away his estate, he rewrote what legacy means. Next came the letter, the one for them. No anger, no venom, just truth. He read it softly, each word like a slow heartbeat. The holidays you skipped, the medicine you cut in half, the day you said, "Let the old man die." The notary turned away, pretending to adjust her glasses. Arthur paused, then continued, voice clear. "Money is nothing compared to respect. You'll understand that too late." When he finished, the room was quiet except for the sound of the heater clicking off. He folded the letter carefully, sealed it, looked at me, and smiled faintly. "Guess that's everything," he said. It wasn't bitterness that filled the room. It was gravity, the kind that pulls your heart down and makes you stand straighter. But there was one thing he didn't tell me, and by the time I found out, it would already be too late to ask. That night, after he fell asleep, I started tidying the room. That's when I saw it, the drawer in his desk, locked, key missing. A small tag taped to the front read, "After." I almost pried it open, then stopped. That drawer would wait, but not for long. Some doors you don't open until they call you. I didn't know it then, but that drawer would change everything. And when it finally opened, the truth wasn't what I thought it would be. That night, the world slowed down. Classical music hummed from the old radio. Frost gathered on the window pane. Arthur talked about Martha, the trip they never took, the wine they saved for an anniversary that never came. I found the bottle behind a row of economics books, dust thick as memory. Port, 50 years old. We poured 2 glasses. "To dignity," he said, lifting his with effort. "To justice," I answered. The port was sharp, sweet, final. For a long time we sat in silence. 2 men from different lives, bound by the same wound and the same will to end it right. Outside, the snow fell without sound. Inside, we'd already said goodbye, just not out loud yet. Around midnight, the rhythm of his breathing changed, not slower, just different, lighter, shallower. I set the book down and took his hand. No words, no drama, just the soft hum of the heater and the faint smell of port still in the air. He looked peaceful, as if the pain had finally remembered how to rest. No grand farewell, no speech about meaning, just a man who'd had enough of carrying other people's weight. The warmth left his hand slowly, like light fading off the edge of a photograph. I whispered, "I'm here." He didn't answer. For the first time in years, Arthur Grant was free, and I'd never felt more alone. Just as I reached to turn off the lamp, the phone on the counter lit up. Unknown caller. I stared at it. No ring, just the glow. Then it went dark again. A second later, a faint sound from outside. Tires crunching on gravel, then silence. I stepped to the window. Nothing but snow and shadows. Maybe grief plays tricks. Maybe not. Either way, I knew that silence wouldn't last long. Diane arrived just after dawn. Her steps were quiet, her face steady. She checked the pulse, noted the time. Peaceful, she said. That's rare. 2 men from the funeral home came with a stretcher. They knew him. Arthur Grant. He ran the community fund, right? Good man. They covered him with the sheet, careful, almost reverent. I signed the paperwork with a shaking hand, initials that barely looked like mine. When the door shut behind them, the house changed. It wasn't just empty. It had lost its heartbeat. The wind slid through the cracks, whistling down the hallway. I sat in his chair and realized, grief doesn't hit like thunder. It hums, constant, quiet, unending. But something in that quiet was still unfinished. After the silence settled, I went to work. Arthur's letter, on the mantel beside the family photo of Mark and Lauren, the evidence timeline, spread across the dining table, each file labeled and dated. The video will, queued up on the TV, screen black, waiting for play, printed cruise photos, time-stamped glossy proof of their betrayal. I placed the rocking chair facing the front door. The empty seat said everything I couldn't. This wasn't revenge, it was revelation, an exhibition of truth. Every piece of paper, every photo, every recording, a brick in the monument Arthur deserved. By the time I finished, the house didn't feel like grief anymore. It felt like judgment waiting to speak. Morning came silver gray. I dressed in a black shirt and a plain tie. Not mourning, just respect. Wiped dust from the photo of Arthur and Martha, the way she leaned into him, forever mid-laugh. I lit the fireplace, turned the flame just 1 notch higher. The warmth spread slowly, crawling up the walls like courage. I looked around, every item in its place. The house wasn't a home anymore. It was a courtroom. Then, faint at first, I heard it. The sound of car doors slamming, voices laughing, luggage wheels crunching on gravel. The storm was coming up the driveway. I took 1 deep breath, steady as stone. Everything we built was about to be tested, and waited. The door burst open with the smell of sunblock and salt air. Laughter spilled in before guilt caught up. Lauren, her mother, Marjorie, Ryan, tan, smiling, carrying bags stamped duty-free. When they saw me, the color drained from their faces. "Mark? What are you doing here?" Lauren asked. "Why are you dressed like a funeral?" I didn't answer, just looked toward the rocking chair, still, empty, heavy with silence. Finally I said it. Arthur died Saturday night. The words hit like a slap in that bright, cheery doorway. Bags slid from their hands, souvenirs rolling across the floor. Ryan's grin faltered. Marjorie's mouth opened, then closed. Lauren's eyes darted everywhere but mine. The vacation was over. Reality had been waiting here the whole time. "Why didn't you wait for us?" Lauren snapped, voice high, brittle. "I called," I said evenly. "Voicemail, every time." She glanced at Marjorie like a kid caught lying. Marjorie crossed her arms, perfume thick enough to choke the air. Ryan hovered by the door, fingers twitching near his phone, already calculating escape. I gestured toward the living room. "Sit down." They did. Not because they wanted to, but because the silence told them to. For the first time since they walked in, I wasn't the caretaker or the fool. I was the one holding the truth, and the room knew it. This wasn't a homecoming anymore. It was court, and I was the only one with evidence. I picked up the cream-colored envelope from the mantel. Arthur's handwriting, slow, steady, deliberate. I began to read. "To my family, who taught me what neglect feels like." Each line landed heavier than the last. No blame, just facts, the missed holidays, the cut medication, the silence when he needed them most. Lauren shifted in her seat. Marjorie's face hardened, stone over shame. Ryan scrolled through his phone, pretending to be somewhere else. The fire crackled once, like punctuation. No one looked at the photo of Arthur and Martha behind me. By the time I finished, the air itself seemed to weigh more. Truth doesn't shout. It just sits there until it breaks you. I picked up the remote and pressed play. Arthur appeared on the screen, clear-eyed, calm, impossibly alive. "My name is Arthur Grant," he said. "If you're hearing this, I'm gone." He listed every act of neglect, each theft, each lie, in perfect order, dates and witnesses. Then came the final blow. "I leave my estate to Mark Dawson, the only person who showed me dignity." No one moved. Marjorie's jaw trembled. Lauren whispered, "He wasn't thinking straight." But the footage showed otherwise. Every word crisp, deliberate. It's hard to argue with the dead when they've already won. The room shrank around them, and I could almost hear Arthur breathing through the speakers, steady, unforgiving. The doorbell cut through the silence. When I opened it, Patricia stood there, trenchcoat, briefcase, notary in tow. "Perfect timing," I said. She stepped in, nodded once. "Patricia Heller, executor of Arthur Grant's estate." Ryan wiped sweat from his forehead. She laid the documents on the table, every motion precise. The notary unpacked his seal. "The proceedings begin now," she said calmly, voice sharp enough to slice through the tension. For the first time, the law itself had entered the house, not as threat, but as judgment. No shouting, no violence, just signatures, dates, and truth, cold and permanent as ink. Patricia's voice was clear, professional. Per Arthur Grant's will, the entirety of his estate is granted to Mark Dawson. Charitable donations will follow per his instructions. Marjorie shot to her feet. "That's impossible," Lauren's breath caught. He was manipulated." Ryan muttered a curse, backing toward the hallway. Patricia didn't blink. She tapped her pen twice on the folder. "There's more." The next clause rolled out like a verdict. "His family is disinherited for cause, abandonment, financial exploitation, elder neglect, all documented." Each word landed like hammer blows. Their faces cracked in slow motion. Disbelief first, then guilt, then fear. Arthur had spoken from beyond the grave, and there was no room left to twist his meaning. They hadn't just lost money. They'd lost the right to call themselves his family. Patricia opened the final folder. 2 doctors' affidavits, clear. Arthur Grant, fully competent. Beside them, the notary's seal, bank verification, timestamps. I added the neighbor's statement, the call log, the cruise photos. Every document fit like rebar in concrete. Lauren tried to speak, but the words dried in her throat. Each page was another wall closing in. No loopholes, no maybe. Marjorie whispered, "You staged this." Patricia didn't look up. "He documented this." The weight of the evidence was physical now. You could feel it pressing against the walls. Arthur's legacy had teeth, and it had bitten down hard. Patricia's tone stayed calm, almost kind. "This property belongs to a holding under Mr. Grant's trust. Mark Dawson is the trustee." Marjorie blinked, confused. "So this house?" "Falls under his control," Patricia said. "And the care expense account you've been withdrawing from? Frozen, pending investigation?" Ryan's jaw tightened. "We should go." Marjorie looked sick. Lauren stared at me as if seeing a stranger wearing her husband's face. All the exits had turned to mirrors. Everywhere they looked, they only saw themselves. Money, property, safety, gone. And in the middle of it, I didn't feel triumph. Just the clean, cold stillness of balance restored. But peace never lasts long in houses built on lies. Patricia kept reading, voice steady. Mr. Grant also allocated funds for Melissa's college. However, those accounts were never opened. Lauren's head dropped. Ryan avoided her eyes. Marjorie pressed her lips so tight they went white. The room fell completely silent. No excuses left. You could almost hear their dignity cracking. I thought of Melissa's face, bright and trusting, believing her future was safe. Now it was just another line item in their theft. Patricia closed the folder softly, like a prayer finished. The truth didn't need volume anymore. It had gravity. Lauren exploded. "You ruined my family." I didn't raise my voice. "Which family?" I asked. "Where were you when he couldn't breathe?" She froze, breath caught halfway between fury and guilt. I set the house keys on the table, metal against wood, final. "You left a man to die. Now you lose the right to call me yours." Her eyes filled but never fell. Ryan stepped back. Marjorie stared at the floor. The silence that followed wasn't peace. It was severance. The sound of something once whole splitting clean in two. I spoke slowly. Everything was done by the book, every document signed, every law followed. Lauren opened her mouth, then stopped. There was nothing left to twist. "You taught me one thing," I said. "Always keep receipts." Patricia nodded once, approval without warmth. Ryan muttered something and slipped out the door. A gust of cold air rushed in behind him. No shouting, no vengeance, just facts, filed and finished. Justice didn't need noise, it just needed time and a steady hand. And for the first time in months, I felt the weight lift, not from winning, but from finally being done. I stepped onto the porch with my bag in hand. Neighbors lingered on their lawns, pretending to rake, pretending not to stare. Mrs. Peterson met my eyes across the street and gave a small nod. Not pity, not gossip. Recognition. I nodded back. The house behind me smelled of smoke and pine, the last trace of Arthur's fire. The wind cut sharp through the quiet. I took one long breath, the kind that hurts before it heals. Then I walked down the steps, suitcase light, conscience lighter. I wasn't leaving in shame. I was leaving with what Arthur gave me, a clean ledger. The room was plain, one lamp, one chair, carpet that smelled like bleach. No photos, no ghosts. I set the suitcase by the bed, opened my laptop, backed up every file again, triple-checked, like a man making sure the past stays archived and sealed. Then an email to Patricia. "Thank you for doing things right." She replied in 3 words. He'd be proud. I stared at the photo of Arthur and Martha on my screen. 2 people who once believed in forever. The heater clicked on. I realized I wasn't angry anymore. Order felt better than revenge. Silence, better than noise. Lying in the half-dark, I replayed my own part in all of it. The years I stopped going to the gym, the nights I canceled on friends because Lauren didn't feel like company. It didn't happen overnight. She just built the walls, and I learned to live inside them. I could blame her forever, or I could start unlocking my own doors. I took the second option. Forgiveness isn't mercy for them. It's oxygen for yourself. I whispered it like a vow. Tomorrow, I start again. And for the first time, I believed it. Morning coffee, black and clean. I polished my resume, sent it to an old buddy at the plant. He wrote back within the hour, "Lunch tomorrow. You still got it, man." I smiled, small but real. Set a 6 a.m. alarm for the gym. Marked a reminder, call Dad's old fishing partner next week. The list wasn't about productivity. It was proof I still had momentum. I turned off the light early, the city hum outside fading into nothing. Sleep came easy, not from exhaustion, but from having a plan again. Snow drifted like dust over the cemetery. I carried a small bouquet. Nothing fancy, just right. Arthur's stone was simple too. I brushed the frost from his name, laid the flowers down, read aloud a few lines from The Big Sleep. He would have liked that, the dry wit, the quiet fatalism. Then I whispered, "To justice, Arthur." And the wind answered with silence. No crowd, no priest, just 2 men, one alive, one remembered, bound by a promise kept. I stood there until my hands went numb, then walked away without looking back. Grief didn't follow. Dignity did. The phone buzzed late. Her name lit the screen. Lauren. I almost let it ring out, but I didn't. "Mark," she said, voice small, broken around the edges. "I'm sorry. Can we talk?" I listened. Every word. The explanations, the guilt, the self-defense folded into apology. When she ran out of breath, I said softly, "You don't owe me a call. Just heal yourself first." Silence stretched, long and clean. Then she whispered, "Goodbye," and hung up. No anger, no victory, just a door closing the way it should have, years ago. For the first time, I didn't want her punished. I wanted her well, somewhere far away from who we used to be. I spent the next morning sorting Arthur's things, the tea set he loved, his worn books, the cufflinks he never wore again after Martha died. Each piece had weight, but not burden. I labeled the boxes, to donation. When the email came back confirming receipt, I felt lighter, almost free. Only one thing I kept, the big sleep. I slid a dried maple leaf between the final pages, pressed flat. It wasn't nostalgia, it was respect, for a man who taught me that endings aren't collapses, they're cleanups. Sometimes letting go is the last honest job a man does, and one of them was about to call again. A week later, Mrs. Peterson's letter appeared in the community bulletin. She called Arthur the quiet man who gave more than he took. At church, the pastor mentioned him by name, the man who'd been forgotten by his own family but remembered by everyone else. That night, neighbors came by with candles, leaving them on Arthur's porch. I stayed across the street, hands in my coat pockets, watching the flicker spread. No one saw me. Didn't matter. The man they honored didn't need witnesses. He already had the truth on record. And standing there, under the cold blue night, I felt something settle inside me. A peace that wasn't loud, but solid. Sometimes, late at night, I think about all the men I know, divorced, quiet, working 2 jobs, carrying their failures like invisible weights. My father used to say, "A man doesn't talk, he does." Back then I thought it meant swallowing everything. Now I think he meant, make your actions count. I opened the notebook labeled Receipts, flipped through pages of proof, names, dates, truth carved in ink. Then I closed it. The work was done. Justice wasn't revenge, it was clarity. That's what men like us really want. Not applause, not sympathy, just to be seen for the way we stood still when the world went loud. I met an old buddy from the plant at a small diner. He stirred his coffee, looked me over. "We need someone steady. You still know your stuff?" I nodded. He smiled. "Good. Start next week. Maintenance lead." We talked projects, bottlenecks, solutions, the language of men who fix things because someone has to. When we shook hands, it wasn't about the job. It was about the return, to purpose, to rhythm, to earning your own weight. Outside, the air was cold but bright. Sunlight hit the chrome of parked cars, hard and clean. For the first time in a long while, I wasn't thinking about what I'd lost, only what I'd finally rebuilt. The studio was small, clean, and mine. One window faced the river. Mornings came in silver. I bought a pour-over kettle, a cheap rug, and a lamp that hummed when it got too hot. Nights were for Chandler. Mornings for push-ups and silence. Work fit into neat blocks on a calendar. Nothing heroic, just steady. Coffee tasted better when you earned it. Sometimes I'd catch my reflection before leaving. Same eyes, less weight behind them. The house I'd left was gone. But somewhere between sweat and stillness, I'd started to feel like a man again. I wrote it on plain paper. "Arthur, I'm doing better." Told him about the new job, the good sleep, the quiet mornings. Thanked him for teaching me that decency still matters. No drama, no confession, just truth, measured and clean. When I finished, I folded it once and tucked it inside the big sleep. Didn't need to send it anywhere. Some letters aren't for mailboxes, they're for peace of mind. And as the paper slid between the pages, I realized grief had turned into something softer, like gratitude that learned how to breathe. Patricia called near dusk, audit complete, no disputes. "The accounts are clean," she said. "Arthur's charities got every cent. They can't touch it." Her tone shifted, warmer. "He'd be proud of you, Mark." I didn't answer right away. Just looked out the window, river light bouncing off the glass. That warmth in my chest. It wasn't pride. It was relief. Paper trails, signatures, witness logs. Each one had built a bridge between justice and rest. "Thank you," I said finally. And meant it. Some victories don't make headlines. They just let you sleep. That night I opened my notebook, same one labeled Receipts. Wrote 4 lines, neat and slow. Don't abandon your friends. Don't skip the gym. Don't stop keeping proof. Don't trade peace for silence. Then I closed the cover. It wasn't a list of rules. It was a map. The kind a man makes after he's been lost long enough to know what matters. Simple, solid, unbreakable. She texted out of nowhere. "Coffee? I owe you thanks." We met at a roadside diner. Same blue eyes as Lauren's, but softer. "I'm ashamed of what they did," she said. I nodded. "Your post, those photos, helped more than you know. Truth needs light." She blinked fast, fighting tears. "Arthur deserved better." I stirred my coffee, watched the cream swirl like smoke. "Yeah," I said, "but at least now he's remembered right." We didn't hug. Didn't need to. Some reconciliations are quiet, like apologies that finally land where they belong. Patricia called first. Her lawyer reached out, she said. They're asking if you'll reconsider terms. I didn't laugh. Patricia sent back the evidence. Video, timeline, medical records, every receipt in order. 2 days later came the reply. They withdraw. No comment. That was the last email with her name in it. I set a filter so anything from that address went straight to archive. For once, closure wasn't dramatic. It was administrative. Click, delete, done. When I turned back to my workbench, the hum of life picked up right where I'd left it. The door to the courtroom closed. The door to the rest of my life finally opened. The machines had their own kind of heartbeat. Not loud, steady, certain. I tightened a seal, adjusted a coupling, and felt the vibration drop smooth. One of the younger guys whistled. That's clean, man. I shrugged, hiding the small smile that came anyway. Years of rust, shaken off in one turn of a wrench. By lunch, the line was running quieter than it had in months. I wrote down the new process, pinned it to the corkboard. No applause, no speeches, just nods. Respect earned, the old-fashioned way. That's the thing about real value. You don't talk it up, you prove it, one bolt at a time. That night, I pan-seared a piece of fish until the edges went crisp gold, poured the last of the old port into a glass, let jazz hum in the background. The air smelled like lemon, oil, and clean peace. I sent a short message to Diane. Thanks again, for everything. She replied with a heart emoji. I ate slowly, letting silence settle around me. Not the kind that echoes, but the kind that fits. Once I would have called this loneliness. Now it just felt like quiet ownership of my own time. Being alone isn't the same as being empty. Sometimes, it's where you finally hear yourself breathe again. I sat by the window, phone in hand, voice recorder open. Spoke without a script. If you've been left, don't destroy yourself. Collect facts, keep moving, feed your body, call your people. Justice doesn't shout, I said. It documents. Each word came out calm, deliberate, no bitterness, just proof that survival has its own tone. I saved the file, private upload. Not for likes, not for pity, just a marker that I'd made it through. Men like me don't post quotes. We file evidence, we heal slow, and we keep receipts. But every man's next receipt starts somewhere new. Sunday morning, I ran along the river trail. Frost clung to the grass, breath came white in the air. Leaves spun in little circles by the water, messy, brief, beautiful. Something about that loop felt right. For the first time in months, there was no weight on my chest, just rhythm, air, motion. I slowed near the bridge, hands on knees, and whispered, "You'd like this, Arthur. Martha, too." A breeze lifted, brushing my sleeve like a reply. Freedom, I realized, doesn't roar. It exhales. I stopped by a used bookstore on Main, the kind that smells like dust, coffee, and second chances. The woman behind the counter saw the Chandler in my hand. "You a fan of the old detectives?" she asked. I told her a little, about the man who lent me the first one, about why I kept reading. She reached under the counter and pulled another volume, worn at the edges. "Take it," she said, "for someone who reads between the lines." I laughed, quiet and surprised. There it was again. Decency, unadvertised, small and human. Sometimes the world doesn't hand you miracles. It just reminds you not everyone forgot how to be kind. On my desk sat a small metal tag. Mark Dawson, maintenance lead. No ceremony, no applause. Just clean engraving, straight lines, right where it belonged. I lined it up square to the edge, then checked the safety checklist for the morning shift. The crew walked in. A few nods, one fist bump. The hum of machines filled the room, deep and steady, like a heartbeat that had found its rhythm again. No one handed me this title. I'd rebuilt it, bolt by bolt, proof by proof. Respect doesn't come from noise, it comes from quiet consistency, the sound of work done right. That night, I sat by the window. The sky was that clear winter blue, cold, honest, no filter. I took a sticky note and wrote 3 words: truth, health, kindness, pressed it onto the mirror above the sink. It looked simple. It was simple. I took one deep breath, turned off my phone, went to bed early, no distractions, no ghosts. Not everything needs an audience. Some promises are meant to stay private, quiet oaths between a man and his reflection. I spoke to the quiet, to whoever was still listening. I lost my marriage, but not myself. Lost money, but found my name again. Arthur lost his life, but kept his honor. The words came out steady, not bitter, like a balance sheet finally closing right. Justice, I said, doesn't always make noise. Sometimes it just leaves the room a little cleaner than it found it. I looked around. Small apartment, warm light, no ghosts, everything in order. Then one last thought. If you've ever walked through darkness, carry two things: your receipts and your kindness. No vengeance, no flame, just truth on paper and peace in your chest. That's all a man really needs to sleep well. Justice served quietly, I whispered, but completely.